I, Mars by Ray Bradbury. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. I, Mars by Ray Bradbury. The phone rang. A gray hand lifted the receiver. Hello? Hello, Barton? Yes. This is Barton. What? This is Barton. It can't be. This phone hasn't rung in 20 years. The old man hung up. Ring. His gray hand seized the phone. Hello, Barton, laughed the voice. You have forgotten, haven't you? The old man felt his heart grow small and like a cool stone. He felt the wind blowing in off the dry Martian seas and the blue hills of Mars. After 20 years of silence and cobwebs, and now tonight, on his 80th birthday, with a ghastly scream, this phone had wailed to life. Who did you think it was? Said the voice. A rocket captain? Did you think someone had come to rescue you? No. What's the date? Numbly. July 20th, 2097. Good Lord, 60 years. Have you been sitting there that long, waiting for a rocket to come from Earth to rescue you? The old man nodded. Now, old man, do you know who I am? Think. Yes. The dry, pale lips trembling. I understand. I remember. We are one. I am Emil Barton, and you are Emil Barton. With one difference. You are 80, I'm only 20. All of life before me. The old man began to laugh and then to cry. He sat holding the phone like a lost and silly child in his fingers. The conversation was impossible and should not be continued, and yet he went on with it. When he got hold of himself, he held the phone close to his withered lips and said, in deepest anguish, Listen, you there. Listen, oh God, if I could warn you. How can I? You're only a voice. If I could show you how long the years are. End it. Kill yourself. Don't wait. If you knew what it is to change from the thing you are to the thing that is me today, here, now, at this end. Impossible, the voice of the young Barton laughed far away. I've no way to tell if you ever get this call. This is all mechanical. You're talking to a transcription, no more. This is 2037, 60 years in your past. Today, the atom wars started on Earth. All colonials were called home from Mars by rocket. I got left behind. I remember, whispered the old man. Alone on Mars, laughed the young voice. A month, a year, who cares? There are food and books. In my spare time, I've made transcription libraries of 10,000 words, responses, my voice, connected to phone relays. In later months, I'll call, have someone to talk with. Yes, murmured the old man, remembering. 46 years from now, my own transcripto tapes will ring me up. I don't really think I'll be here on Mars that long. It's just a beautifully ironic idea of mine. Something to pass the time. Is that really you, Barton? Is that really me? Tears fell from the old man's eyes. Yes. I've made 1,000 Bartons, tapes, sensitive to all questions, my voice, and 1,000 Martian towns, an army of Bartons over Mars, while I wait for the rockets to return. You fool, the old man shook his head wearily. You waited 60 years. You grew old waiting, always alone. And now you've become me, and you're still alone in the empty cities. Don't expect my sympathy. You're like a stranger off in another country. I can't be sad. I'm alive when I make these tapes. And you're alive when you hear them. Both of us, to the other, incomprehensible. Neither can warn the other, even though both respond one to the other, one automatically, the other warmly and humanly. I'm human now, you're human later. It's insane. I can't cry because, not knowing the future, I can only be optimistic. These hidden tapes can only react to a certain number of stimuli from you. Can you ask a dead man to weep? Stop it, cried the old man, for his heart was sickening in him. He felt the familiar great seizures of pain. Nausea moved through him and blackness. "Stop it! Oh, God, but you were heartless! Go away!" "Were, old man? I am. As long as the tapes glide on, as long as secret spindles and hidden electronic eyes read and select and convert words to send to you, I'll be young, cruel, blunt. I'll go on being young and cruel long after you're dead. Goodbye." "Wait!" cried the old man. Click. Barton sat holding the silent phone a long while. His heart gave him intense pain. What insanity it had been. In youth's flush, how silly, how inspired, those first secluded years, fixing the telephonic brains, the tapes, the circuits, scheduling calls on time relays. Bring! "Morning, Barton. This is Barton. 7 o'clock. Rise and shine." Bring! "Barton? Barton calling. You're to go to Marstown at noon. Install a telephonic brain. Thought I'd remind you." "Thanks." Bring! "Barton? Barton. Have lunch with me? The Rocket Inn?" "Right. See you. So long." Bring! "That you be? Thought I'd cheer you. Firm chin and all that. The rescue rocket might come tomorrow to save you." "Yes, tomorrow. Tomorrow. Click. But 40 years had burned into smoke. Barton had muted the insidious phones and their clever repartee. He had sealed them into silences. They were to call him only after he was 80, if he still lived. And now, today, the phones ringing and the past breathing in his ear, sighing, whispering, murmuring, and remembering. Bring! He let it ring. "I don't have to answer it," he thought. Bring! "There's no one there at all," he thought. Bring! "It's like talking to yourself," he thought, "but different. Oh, God, how different." He felt his hands crawl unconsciously toward the phone. Click. "Hello, old Barton. This is young Barton. 1 year older, though. I'm 21 today. In the last year, I've put voice brains in 200 towns on Mars. I've populated it with arrogant Bartons." "Yes." The old man remembered those days 6 decades ago, those nights of rushing over blue hills and into iron valleys of Mars with a truck full of machinery, whistling, happy. Another telephone, another relay, something to do, something clever and wonderful and sad, hidden voices, hidden. In those young days when death was not death, time was not time, old age a faint echo from the long blue cavern of years ahead. That young idiot, that sadistic fool, never thinking to reap the harvest so sown. "Last night," said Barton, aged 21, "I sat alone in a movie theater in an empty town. I played an old Laurel and Hardy. Laughed so much. God, how I laughed." "Yes." "I got an idea today. I recorded my voice 1,000 times on one tape. Broadcast from the town. It sounds like 1,000 people living there. A comforting noise, the noise of a crowd. I fixed it so doors slam in town. Children sing. Music boxes play, all by clockworks. If I don't look out the window, if I just listen, it's all right. But if I look, it spoils the illusion. There's only one solution. I'll populate the town with robots. I guess I'm getting lonely." The old man said, "Yes, that was your first sign." "What?" "The first time you admitted you were lonely." "I've experimented with smells. As I walk down the deserted streets, the smells of bacon and eggs, ham, steak, fillets, soups come from the houses, all done with hidden machines. Clever? Fantasy. Madness. Self-protection, old man." "I'm tired." Abruptly, the old man hung up. It was too much. The past pouring over him, drowning him. Swaying, he moved down the tower stairs to the streets of the town. The town was dark. No longer did red neons burn, music play, or cooking smells linger. Long ago he had abandoned the grim fantasy of the mechanical lie. Listen. Are those footsteps? Smell. Isn't that strawberry pie? No, he had stopped it all. What had he done with the robots? His mind puzzled. Oh, yes. He moved to the dark canal where the stars shone in the quivering waters. Underwater, in row after fish-like row, rusting, were the robot populations of Mars he had constructed over the years, and, in a wild realization of his own insane inadequacy, had commanded to march, 1, 2, 3, 4, into the canal deeps, plunging, bubbling like sunken bottles. He had killed them and shown no remorse. Ring! Faintly a phone rang in a lightless cottage. He walked on. The phone ceased. Ring! Another cottage ahead, as if it knew of his passing. He began to run. The ringing stayed behind, only to be taken up by a ringing from now this house. Ring! Now that. Now here. There. He turned the corner. A phone. He darted on. Another corner. Another phone. All right, he shrieked, exhausted. I'm coming. Hello, Barton. What do you want? I'm lonely. I only live when I speak, so I must speak. You can't shut me up forever. Leave me alone, said the old man in horror. Oh, my heart! This is Barton, age 24, another couple of years gone, waiting. A little lonelier. I've read War and Peace, drunk sherry, run restaurants with myself as waiter, cook, and entertainer. And tonight I star in a film at the Tivoli. Emil Barton in Love's Labor Lost, playing all the parts, some with wigs myself. Stop calling me! The old man's eyes were fiery and insane. Or I'll kill you! You can't kill me, you'll have to find me first. I'll find you. A choking. You've forgotten where you hid me. I'm everywhere in Mars. In boxes and houses and cables, towers, underground. Go ahead, try. What'll you call it? Telecide? Suicide? Jealous, are you? Jealous of me here, only 24, bright-eyed, strong, young? All right, old man, it's war. Between us, between me, a whole regiment of us, all ages from 20 to 60 against you, the real one. Go ahead, declare war. I'll kill you, screamed Barton. Click, silence. Kill you! He threw the phone out the window, shrieking. In the midnight cold, the ancient automobile moved in deep valleys. Under Barton's feet on the floorboard were revolvers, rifles, dynamite. The roar of the car was in his thin, tired bones. I'll find them, he thought. Find and destroy. All of them. Oh, God, how can he do this to me? He stopped the car. A strange town lay under the late twin moons. There was no wind. He held the rifle in his cold hands. He peered at the poles, the towers, the boxes. Where was this town's voice hidden? That tower? Or that one there? Where? So many years ago, so long gone, so forgotten. He turned his head now this way, now that, wildly. It must be that tower. Was he certain? Or this box here? Or the transformer half up that tower? He raised the rifle. The tower fell with the first bullet. All of them, he thought. All of the towers in this town will have to be cut apart. I've forgotten. Too long. The car moved along the silent street. Pring. He looked at the deserted drugstore. Pring. Pistol in hand, he shot the lock off the door and entered. Click. Hello, Barton. Just a warning. Don't try to rip down all the towers, blow things up. Cut your own throat that way. Think it over. Click. He stepped out of the phone booth slowly and moved into the street and listened to the telephone towers humming high in the air, still alive, still untouched. He looked at them, and then he understood. He could not destroy the towers. Suppose a rocket came from Earth. Impossible idea, but suppose it came tonight, tomorrow, next week, and landed on the other side of the planet, and used the phones to try to call Barton, only to find the circuits dead. Yes, imagine. Barton dropped his gun. A rocket won't come, he argued, softly, logically with himself.
I'm old. It won't come now, it's too late. But suppose it came and you never knew, he thought. No, you've got to keep the lines open. Ring.
He turned dully. His eyes were blinking and not seeing. He shuffled back into the drugstore and fumbled with the receiver. Hello? A strange voice.
Please,
pleaded the old man brokenly.
Don't bother me.
Who's this? Who's there? Who is it? Where are you? Cried the voice, surprised.
Wait a minute.
The old man staggered.
This is Emil Barton. Who's that?
This is Captain Leonard Rockwell, Earth Rocket 48. Just arrived from New York.
No.
Are you there, Mr. Barton?
No, it can't be. It just can't.
Where are you?
You're lying. It's false.
The old man had to lean against the booth wall. His blue eyes were cold blind.
It's you, Barton, making fun of me, lying to me again.
This is Captain Rockwell, Rocket 48. Just landed in New Schenectady. Where are you?
In Greentown, he gasped. That's 1,000 miles from you.
Look, Barton, can you come here?
What?
We've repairs on our rocket, exhausted from flight. Can you come help?
Yes.
We're at the tarmac outside town. Can you rush by tomorrow?
Yes, but...
Well? The old man petted the phone pitifully.
How's Earth? How's New York? Is the war over? Who's president now? What happened?
Plenty of time for gossip when you arrive.
Is everything fine?
Fine.
Thank God.
The old man listened to the far voice.
Are you sure you're Captain Rockwell?
Damn it, man.
I'm sorry.
He hung up and ran. They were here, after many years, unbelievable, his own, who would take him back to earth, seas, and skies and mountains. He started the car. He would drive all night. Could he do it? What of his heart? It would be worth a risk, to see people, to shake hands, to hear them near you. The car thundered in the hills. That voice, Captain Rockwell, it couldn't be himself 40 years ago. He had never made a recording like that. Or had he? In one of his depressive fits, in a spell of drunken cynicism, hadn't he once made a false tape of a false landing on Mars with a synthetic captain? An imaginary crew? He jerked his gray head savagely. No, he was a suspicious fool. Now was no time to doubt. He must run under the moons of Mars hour on hour. What a party they would have. The sun rose. He was immensely tired, full of thorns and brambles of weakness, his heart plunging and aching, his fingers fumbling the wheel. But the thing that pleased him most was the thought of one last phone call. Hello, young Barton. This is old Barton. I'm leaving for Earth today. Rescued. He chuckled weakly. He drove into the shadowy limits of New Schenectady at sundown. Stepping from his car, he stood staring at the rocket tarmac, rubbing his reddened eyes. The rocket field was empty. No one ran to meet him. No one shook his hand, shouted, or laughed. He felt his heart roar into pain. He knew blackness and a sensation of falling through the open sky. He stumbled toward an office. Inside, 6 phones sat in a neat row. He waited, gasping. Finally, bring. He lifted the heavy receiver. A voice said, I was wondering if you'd get there alive. The old man did not speak, but stood with the phone in his hands. The voice continued, an elaborate joke. Captain Rockwell, reporting for duty, sir. Your order, sir?
You,
groaned the old man. How's your heart, old man?
No.
Hoped the trip would kill you. Had to eliminate you some way so I could live, if you call a transcription living.
I'm going out now, replied the old man. And Blow it all up. I don't care. I'll blow up everything until you're all dead.
You haven't the strength. Why do you think I had you travel so far, so fast? This is your last trip. The old man felt his heart falter. He would never make the other towns. The war was lost. He slid into a chair and made low, sobbing, mournful noises from his loose mouth. He glared at the 5 other silent phones. As if at a signal, they burst into silver chorus, a nest of ugly birds screaming. Automatic receivers popped up. The office whirled. "Barton! Barton! Barton!" He throttled the phone in his hands. The voice, the youth, the time of long ago. He mashed, choked it, and still it laughed at him. He throttled it. He beat it. He kicked at it. He hated it with hands and mouth and blind, raging eye. He furled the hot wire like serpentine in his fingers, ripped it into red bits which fell about his stumbling feet. He destroyed 3 other phones. There was a sudden silence. And as if his body now discovered a thing which it had long kept secret, it seemed to decay upon his tired bones. The flesh of his eyelids fell away like flower petals. His mouth became a withered rose, the lobes of his ears melting wax. He pushed his chest with his hands and fell face down. He lay still. His breathing stopped. His heart stopped. After a long spell, the remaining 2 phones rang. Twice. 3 times. A relay snapped somewhere. The 2 phone voices were connected, one to the other. "Hello, Barton?" "Yes, Barton." "Age 24. I'm 26. We're both young. What's happened?" "I don't know. Listen." The silent room. The old man did not stir on the floor. The wind blew in the broken window. The air was cool. "Congratulate me, Barton. This is my 26th birthday." "Congratulations." Laughter drifted out the window into the dead city. End of I, Mars by Ray Bradbury.
Momentum by Catherine McLean. Writing as Charles Dye. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Glenn Carruthers. Momentum by Catherine McLean. Asteroid 1207 came spinning into the auxiliary ship's viewplate like a glittering black mirage. The 8-mile chunk of rock was the last link in a chain of 9 asteroid navigation markers still needing blinker equipment installation. Minutes later, the minnow lay neatly berthed in the deepest hollow of the asteroid, the shining wires of its drill grapples anchoring it firmly into the jagged rock. The airlock opened and 2 men in spacesuits stepped out. They climbed to the top of the nearest hill, dragging a platform of tools and equipment. The ragged, close horizons of the asteroid made a hostile background for them as they worked in silence. Ballard leaned far over the rough edge of a circular pit, directing the heat radiation beam that melted the foundation plastic smoothly over the walls. He couldn't spare the time to turn his head and watch Walton, but he could follow the other's progress in welding the framework of the blinker tower by the irregular breathing and clanks and buzzes coming through his earphones. He listened to Walton's motions with an automatic alertness developed over 6 long weeks of tension, ever since the finding of the Rotonite nuggets on the second of the light marker asteroids. The Rotonite represented enough wealth to make them among the richest men in the solar system, or one of them, the richest. That was what Ballard was afraid of. Suddenly the clanks and rustles stopped and Walton's voice muttered, "Must have left the number 3 flux, better go back for it." "What?" Ballard caught himself asking rhetorically, apprehension flooding through him. "I said I left something, have to go back and get it." There was a faint tremor in Walton's voice. With a hard calm he wouldn't have recognized 6 weeks ago, Ballard considered the consequences of making an excuse to go with Walton. But the excuse would destroy the pose of innocence he'd so carefully acted since his first suspicions of Walton's intention. And he could be wrong, no sense in antagonizing Walton, particularly with the frayed condition both their nerves were in. "Okay," he grunted. "Bring back another 5R bit. This one I've been using chitters." There were sounds of Walton bounding down toward the ship in the peculiar dancing glide demanded by low gravity. Methodically, without looking up, Ballard continued his job, following Walton with his earphones. Only when the foundation fill was laid would it seem natural for him to stop working for a moment and go to the ship. Gradually, layer on layer, the plastic melted, coated the walls and hardened. He heard Walton reach the ship. Then there was a slight ringing noise as the man touched his key magnet to the airlock. As Walton entered the lock, his mic registered the pressure of the air by suddenly picking up the sound of the ship, the throbbing of the generators, the intermittent rush and sigh of the air conditioner, and the close curved walls echoing back the scrape of his shoes on the locker room floor. 4 minutes to go. Ballard finished melting the plastic onto the walls, resisting the urge to hurry and risk botching the work. Walton had no reason to kill him, except for the rotonite, and since its discovery, Walton had shown nothing but a surface of friendship covering a hidden hatred and fear that was growing into surreptitious maneuverings towards murder. But with a pretense at normality, Ballard hoped Walton would get over his obsession and forget it, never knowing that he'd seen anything suspicious, and meanwhile Ballard had only to stay out of the way of accidents without seeming suspiciously careful. He added the last necessary layer of plastic, switched off the heat beam and stood up. There was no sign of motion around the minnow. Walton had not come out, but Ballard's earphones continued to pick up Walton's nervous, irregular breathing. Ballard started down the hill in long, floating bounds. The minnow expanded up at him, a ship etched in black and white against the jagged mass of black and grey oars. Just before landing on his second bound, his earphones picked up a sharp, metallic ringing note he couldn't identify. Suddenly the ship expanded up directly in front of him. He'd overshot his landing. He thudded into the ship, slid down to the ground and landed facing the lock, his key magnet in hand. Again he heard the familiar tuning fork note, this time ringing faintly up from the magnet in his own hand as he put it against the circle of lighter metal that was the lock. The circle turned with the magnet rotating out into a handle. He grabbed it and yanked to slide back the airlock panel. The yank pulled him off his feet. For an instant he couldn't orientate. Then he realized that he had only moved because the panel had not. It was a case of action or reaction. The panel had not budged, seeming to be one with the flawless sweep of the whole. He tried again, yanking it with the same futile results. Apprehension flooded through him. "Walton," he called. "Walton, the panel's stuck. Open it from the inside." For an instant he was aware of Walton's nervous breathing. Then it stopped. There was a low chuckle. "Listen, Ballard, I'd be crazy to let you in. Don't you think I've seen you watching me like a hawk ever since we found the rotonite, just waiting for the chance to catch me off guard? I should have done this weeks ago, but it didn't occur to me how clean and easy it would be until I thought of the airlock jamming with you outside. So the lock is jammed and you have left a little over 2 hours of suit oxygen. And while you're out there suffocating to death, I'll be waiting in my sleep tank on a nice euphoric jag. It's going to be nice being the richest man in the... Wait, Walton, listen. You're all wrong. Walton had cut his radio. For a moment, Ballard dumbly stood there, his mind racing around like a pinwheel. Slowly it stopped as numbing fear coursed through his nervous system. He'd under-concealed his suspicions after all. Walton had suspected him of the very same thing he'd suspected Walton of. Suddenly, in spite of his predicament, in spite of death waiting for him only a few hours in the future, Ballard smiled. He really couldn't hate Walton for what he'd done. It was the old cliché again of too much greed and suspicion. He realized that this didn't alter the fact that he was going to die, unless he could think of something fast. Ballard looked at his chronometer. He now had less than 2 hours. In spite of this, his mind suddenly calmed and became clear. First, he'd have to think of all the possibilities of getting into the minnow, then allot only so much time to each possibility. There was a welding torch, the heat beam, the pneumatic jackhammer, and miscellaneous hand tools. Surely with that assortment he could knock or burn a hole in the ship, or the air would swish out, but there would be enough suit cylinders to allow him to take the ship back if he didn't damage it too badly getting in. And Walton would be safe in his sleep tank. Ballard would see to that by disconnecting the awakener. Ballard smiled at the stars as he bounded back to the hill where the tools lay. Walton had been a fool to lock him out there with cutting, burning and pounding equipment, and almost 2 hours in which to use them. Things weren't so bad after all. He decided to try the welding torch first. He crossed over to the almost completed blinker tower and picked up the torch and power pack. Then from a toolbox he selected a cutting nozzle. Carefully, so as not to exert himself and waste oxygen, he glided down with his gear to the aft section of the minnow's hull, just forward of the tubes where the skin was thinnest. As he ignited the torch, he was aware of what a temptation it was to drain off all the oxygen contained in the power pack of his own cylinder. Quickly he went ahead and applied the torch to the skin of the ship. Ballard glanced at his chronometer. An hour and a half to go. Good. 15 minutes would be long enough to tell whether the torch would cut through the skin or not. If it would, then he could use the rest of the time in cutting the hole. After the first 5 minutes, he turned the nozzle away and examined the spot where it had been applied. Not a mark. 6 minutes went by, then 7, 8, 9. Again he looked at the skin, still no change. 3 more minutes went by. Ballard felt sweat break out on his face as he pulled the torch away for the third time. For a moment, his eyes still blinded by the glare, he could see nothing. His heart sank. Then he detected a faint red spot with a whitish centre. It was working. 3 more minutes and the hole would be started. He turned back the nozzle to the glowing spot. Then with dismay he watched the torch sputter and go dead. Frantically he pushed the activator button. Stunned, he finally noticed that the power pack read empty. Walton had nearly exhausted it on the blinker tower. Ballard glanced at his wrist. He still had an hour and 14 minutes. He didn't smile at the stars this time as he went back up the hill. Things didn't seem ironic anymore, merely dangerous. He loaded the heat beam with its larger power pack onto the equipment platform and slowly dragged it behind him down to the ship. An hour and 2 minutes left. He went to work adjusting the beam to its maximum intensity, then moving it as close to the hole as possible, he turned it on full force. Time seemed to have stopped, twice in 1 minute. Ballard glanced at his wrist, expecting to see a lapse of 10 or 15 minutes. Only 5 minutes had dragged by. He now had just 57 left. The spacesuit suddenly began reminding him of a coffin. With superhuman effort, he jerked his thoughts away from suffocation and back to the job. 45 minutes to go. The beam wasn't going to work. The sudden realization cut into Ballard like a knife. He should have known that in the first place, a beam meant for plastic wasn't intense enough for the skin of a spaceship. This time, as Ballard once more climbed the hill, the stars seemed to be smiling at him, but not with friendliness. They seemed to smile death. He got the jackhammer all the way down to the ship before a devastating thought struck him. He'd forgotten that the hammer had a cracked 5R bit. It would fly to pieces on the diamond hardness of the hole. He sat down, stunned at the fact that he'd run out of things to try. The ship lay before him like some impenetrable fortress. Several precious minutes dragged by before Ballard could again calm his spinning brain. He still had 40 minutes. Had he overlooked any other possibility of getting into the ship? Slowly he walked around the minnow, concentrating as he had never concentrated before. Then, as he stepped in front of the drive tube, something clicked. The main tube was large enough for him to crawl into. If he could remove the recoil plate and hydraulic mechanism, he might be able to burn a hole through the ordinary steel bulkhead beyond. Half bounding and half running, he returned from the hill with the toolbox. After selecting several likely wrench sizes, he grabbed a flashlight and crawled up the tube. He wasted 5 minutes unscrewing the first bolt holding the plate in place. The second bolt was so corroded he couldn't budge it. Cursing, he crawled out and dragged in the jackhammer, hoping the cracked 5R bit would hold until the bolt was knocked out. It almost held, flying to pieces just as there was a 1/4 inch to go. Frantically, he somehow managed to knock the remainder out with the chunk of the hammer, but it had taken Ballard 5 more minutes. Only 25 left. He went out and grabbed the crowbar and pried the plate off. Recoil cylinder and hydraulic fluid flowing like a jack-in-the-box. After cleaning out the drive tube, he almost lost his reason when he discovered the cable connecting the beam to the power pack wasn't long enough to reach the bulkhead. Fortunately, he found an extension in the bottom of the toolbox. 15 minutes to go. That should be just long enough. He switched on the beam. Now time seemed to race by. At 10 minutes to go, the bulkhead turned cherry red. At 5 minutes, it was almost white. At 4, the steel started to buckle. At 3, the heat beam suddenly went dead. The power pack was empty. Ballard's reason reeled. He grabbed the crowbar and jabbed at the fast-cooling metal. Too late. In the 1 minute he had left to live, Ballard suddenly became calm, reconciling himself to his end. Wearily he crawled out of the tube. At least Walton would be in for a nasty surprise, with the main drive recoil plate gone, and to make sure, he would push it off into space. With one last surge of fury, he dragged up the foot-thick plate he could never have lifted back on Earth and started shoving it to give it momentum. Momentum equals velocity times mass. Suddenly he stopped, the plate drifting on ahead of him. Now why had he thought of that? Something from his school days. He tried hard to remember. Something about mass. Mass is a constant. Weight is a variable. But mass is what knocks holes in things. Spaceships, for instance. Just one thing could save him now. Momentum. Ballard glanced at his wrist. 20 seconds to go. Then maybe another 20 from the oxygen in the connecting tube. Not much time. He bounded off after the still drifting plate, then began forcing it around in a semicircle back toward the ship. The recoil plate sluggishly began to move faster as it gained momentum. It started getting ahead of him, so he gave it one last push, and it slowly crept away, heading straight for the hole. It floated edgewise into the aft section, and kept on going. A 3-foot stream of light poured out from the side of the ship. Ballard started crawling into the hole, and the light wavered and brightened. He couldn't understand it. Then it dimmed altogether. The last of his oxygen was gone. Dizzily, he tried to squeeze through the rip. He kept slipping back. There was a roaring darkness all around him, but he could still crawl. For ages he seemed to be crawling over polished glass. His head crashed into something that clanged hollowly. Some fading portion of his consciousness told him that he was inside the ship, and the clang had been the space locker. Automatically, as though by instinct, he reached up and fumbled with his handle. Then he was clumsily trying to fit a new oxygen cylinder into place. Ballard awoke feeling cramped and tired, as though he'd slept all night in a birdcage. He looked at his chronometer, then his suit air gauge. No, he'd been out only a few minutes. He got up and crawled into the sleep tank compartment and disconnected Walton's awakener. Then he went into the control room and looked up the nearest space freighter lane in the radio call book and set up an automatic distress signal. He felt as if he were going to pass out again, this time from sheer fatigue. There was still one more thing he wanted to do. Out of the nose of the compartment he hauled a small case containing what had caused all the trouble. Then he crawled back through the torn whole skin, opened the case and flung every single one of the rotonite nuggets far out into space. End of Momentum by Catherine McLean. Recording by Glenn Carruthers. Pyramont Country.
Perchance to Dream by Richard Stockham. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. All along the line of machines, the man's hands and arms worked like the legs of spiders spinning a web. The wound wire and hammered bolts, tied knots, and welded pieces of steel and fitted gears. They did not look at each other, or sing, or whistle, or talk, or laugh. And then he made a mistake. Instantly, he stepped back, and a troubleshooter moved into his place. The troubleshooter's hands flew over the controls. The troubleshooter finished, and the workman took his place. His arms moved ceaselessly again. He was a tall man, slim and wiry. His dress identical to that of the others, gray coveralls that fit like tights. Suddenly, a red light flashed in his eyes, and he began to tremble. He took 2 steps backward. The troubleshooter moved into the empty space. The man stood for a moment, like a soldier at attention, turned and walked smartly toward the mouth of a corridor. The silence was like a motion picture with a dead soundtrack. There was only motion, and him walking down the line of machines where the hands reached out, working. In the corridor now, he looked straight ahead, marching. The walls glowed like water beneath a shallow sea. He raised his arm, felt the door strike in the heel of his hand, felt it swing open, saw the desk suspended from the ceiling by luminous silver chains. A man with a massive, white-maned head and a pink, smiling face rose from behind the desk. His suit was like that of a general. Well, 23. The superfather stared down at the dossier on his desk. 2 mistakes in 3 months. Too bad. Just when you were on your way to the head of the machine room. I don't know what's the matter with me, said 23. I'm afraid we'll have to drop you back to a less responsible position. Of course. The superfather looked up quickly. You accept this? No depression? No threat of suicide? You are in bad shape. He handed a packet of cards to 23. Put these in your dream machine tonight. Go to your new job tomorrow. 23 stood motionless, staring over the other man's shoulder. The superfather sat down. Tell me about the dreams you have when you don't use the machine. 23 made a quick decision. He couldn't tell him he didn't use the standard dream cards anymore. And he certainly couldn't tell about the other dream cards he'd been getting from the little man he'd met on the street. He'd simply answered the factual truth to the question that had been asked. Well, he said, as though he were confessing a crime, I dream I'm walking in the city. It's dark. I feel like I've got to find something. I don't know what, but the feeling's very strong. All of a sudden, I notice the city's empty. There are just buildings and streets and a faint glow of light. And it comes to me that everybody's dead and buried. Then I know what I'm looking for. I've got to find something alive or I'll die too. So I start running around, in and out buildings, up and down streets, but there's nothing. I'm breathing so hard, I think my heart's going to burst. Finally, I fall down. I feel myself beginning to die. I try to get up, but I can't. I try to yell. I've got no voice. I'm so afraid. I can't stand it. Then I wake up. The superfather frowned. Incredible. Several other cases like yours have turned up in the last month. We're working on them, but yours is the worst yet. You had such high capabilities. Your test showed when you first began to work 10 years ago that you were capable of going to the head of your production line. But you're not doing it. Also, your normal dreams should correspond to the ones on the cards, and they don't. Are you using the standard cards every other night? 23 lied. Yes. At the nights you don't use them, you have a dream like the one you just told me. That's right. Incredible. The superfather shook his head. It just doesn't add up. As you know, you get the prescribed dreams every other night, and that's supposed to condition your mind to dreaming those same dreams by itself on the nights you don't use the machine. The prescribed dreams merely show you the true way of life. And when you're on your own, you're supposed to follow that way of life, whether you're asleep or awake. That's what the dream machine is for. I'm sure you're aware of all this. Yes, said 23. Yes. Now, we superfathers never have to use the dream machines. We're so filled with the way of life they advocate, and it's become such an integral part of us. We simply are what our prescribed dreams are. And the more successful a person is in the city, the less he has to use the dream machine. Now you have to use it every other night. That's entirely too much for a man of your potential. You realize this, of course. Oh, I do, said 23, shaking his head sadly. Well now, said the superfather, that means something's wrong. very wrong. He rubbed his chin, thinking. Your prescribed dreams show you working faster and faster on the machines, going on month after month, year after year, with 100% accuracy. They show you happy in your work, driven by ambition on up to the end of your capabilities. They show you contented there to the end of your working life. He paused. And you're doing just the opposite. I suppose your wife is concerned? 23 nodded. After all, the marriage center assured her your index was right for her. Her sleep cards were coordinated with yours. The normal dreams of both of you without the machine should be identical. Yet you come up with this horror, running through the city, alone, falling, dying. 23's mouth twitched. Well, the superfather stood. If you can't adjust to normal, we'll simply have to send you to the prefrontal lobotomy men. You wouldn't want that. Oh, no. Good. The superfather held out another packet of cards. Use these tomorrow night. It's a concentration pattern, which should be dense enough to make you dream of being, well, perhaps even president, eh? Yes. 23 hesitated. Well, said the superfather, I'd like to ask a question. The superfather nodded. What use, went on 23, is all this work being put to that we do along the machine lines every day? We don't seem to really be making anything, just working. The superfather's eyes narrowed. You're kept busy, you get paid, you live. The city is here. That's all. That's enough. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. 23 turned abruptly, marched to the door, and stepped into the empty, silent corridor. 23 looked up at the glowing dome of the city that curved away to the horizon. He wondered if there really was a white ball beyond it sometimes, and tiny dots of light set in blue-black. And at other times, did a ball of fire flame up there, giving light and heat and life? And if there was this life and light up there, why the great dome over the city? Why the factories and machine lines replacing it? Section after section, generation after generation. The slabs that the workers fused together this year, and the next, pushing back this life and light and heat. Why not let it pour down into the city and warm all the people? Why not go to the space out there in the depth and freedom? Why this great shell that closed them away? For the sake of the superfathers, maybe? And the superfathers plus? For the sake of the ones like himself, maybe? Who worked and built? For the sake of them, so they wouldn't become dangerous, maybe? And tear the Great Wall down and rush out into whatever was beyond? Why else? But it could be all a farce. They could all be working in the Great Dome because they didn't know what was beyond. Who could know if they'd never been beyond? And so they were held under the domes with the buildings and the machines that carried them all around in the city. Held with the plumbing and the theaters and all the intricate mechanisms that spoke to them and fed them, that washed them and poured thoughts into their minds, that healed them when they were sick and rested them when they were tired. The same as they were held with the Great Dome. held and shackled with the replacing of parts that didn't need replacing, the making over and over again of the tiny and large pieces of the mechanisms, and the taking of the old mechanisms, and the melting of them or smashing of them to powder, so that this dust or molten metal could be fashioned again and again into the same pieces that they had been for so many thousands of years. All this to keep them busy? All this to keep something outside that was supposed to be destructive because once it had been, so 5,000 years ago, or 10, or 50? All this because that was the way it had been for as long as the hundreds and the thousands of years that history had been recorded? He walked on through the silence, dimly aware now of the people moving about him, of the automobiles rolling past. As though moved by some invisible force, he passed row upon row of movie theaters that called to him with invisible vibrations. He turned away. Where was the little man? He stopped, moving only his eyes. After a moment, he saw the little man step out of a shop front and stand waiting. 23, a cigarette in his mouth, walked over and asked for a light. The little man touched a lighter to the cigarette, at the same time dropping a packet of cards into 23's pocket. 23 moved on. He felt the pounding of his heart. If only his wife were asleep, so he would not have to wait to look at these new cards. As he walked, his thoughts cried out against the silence. He glanced suspiciously from side to side. If only he could hear the sounds of the city. But except for human voices and music, the city had always been silent. The human voices spoke only words written by the superfathers, and the music came from records that had been composed by them. All this back when the city had first come into being. Other than these sounds, there could be only the quiet all around. No chugging motors or scraping footsteps. No crashing engines in the sky or pounding of steel on stone. No shrieking of factory whistles or clanging steeple bells or honking automobile horns. None of this to pluck and pound at nerves, to suggest that this place was not the most soothing and gentle of all places to be in. There were no winds to swirl and moan away into the distance. The chirp of birds had long since been stilled, and so had the patter of rain and the crash of thunder. There must not be any of these sounds either to lure the imagination into some distance where danger and excitement might be waiting. Now he was walking toward the door of his apartment house. It swung open. 30 seconds later, he stopped before another door. It too swung open. His wife stood in the middle of the room, between two traveling bags. He moved slowly toward her and stopped just out of arm's reach. "What's this?" He gestured toward the bags. "Where are you going?" She stared at him for a long moment, her face set. She was of his height and build, and wore a suit the same light gray as his. Their haircuts were identical, their faces sharp-featured and pale. They might have been brother and sister, or two brothers, or two sisters. "I'm going to the marriage center." "What for?" He had tried to inject surprise into his voice, but the tone is listless. "The superfather called about your dream." 23 turned away, lighted a cigarette. He should beg her to stay, should promise to change, but the silence was in him like a sickness. "A terrible thing's happened to you. I don't want any part of it." She picked up the bags. "When you come to your senses, You know where to reach me. If I haven't already made another contract, I might come back to you. She hesitated at the door. There's one thing I don't understand. You haven't begged me to stay. You haven't broken down. You haven't threatened suicide. She paused. It's standard procedure, you know. Might even make me decide to wait a while. I don't want you to stay, he said. He felt a shock of surprise. It was as though a voice had spoken from behind him. He watched the door shut between them. Dressed in his pajamas, he stood beside the metal tube in which for so many years he had slept his regulation sleep and dreamed his regulation dreams. There was something of the finely made casket about this tube. The 6-foot length and 3-foot diameter, the lid along its top, and the dull shine of the metal and the quiet of it, as though it were asleep and lying in wait for a tired body to bring it awake, so that it could put the body to sleep and live in the dreams it would give to the sleeper. Beside his own tube stood its twin, where his wife had also slept and dreamed through the years. Leaning slightly forward, he felt the press of metal against his hip bones, felt the tube roll an inch with his weight. He rested one hand on the metal top, felt its warmth and smoothness, was aware of its cleanness, like that of a surgical instrument. Now he glanced at the glistening black panel that stood 2 feet high at the tube's head, quickly checked its 4 illuminated dials and 3 gleaming arrows, and at the same time raised his hand to drop the cards into the softly glowing slot at the panel's top. Suddenly, his hand stopped. He bent forward. What was this? A feeling of strangeness. Vague, like sensing some subtle change in a picture that has hung for 20 years above the fireplace in one's home. He drew closer, squinting. The dials and meters seemed to be the same as they had yesterday, and the day before, and the year before. And yet, the dials larger by a fraction, and the tiny gleaming arrows of the meters barely longer, and the marks on the dials and meters 1 extra each, very faintly, like a piece of hair. It was very still for a long moment. Then he moved around the foot of his own sleeping tube, pushed between the two, and stood at the head of the other one. He checked its dials and meters. They were as they had been for many years. He stepped back to the panel of his own and pressed a button. As the glistening metal top rose, silently, he ran his hand around the yawning interior, felt the downy softness and the body-like warmth. Then his hand touched a pliable metal plate. It should not be there. He stood back, remembering the workmen who had come into the house that morning for the routine checkup of the tubes. His wife had already left for work, and he had just stepped through the door when they had met him in the corridor. They had gone on into the rooms, and he had sensed vaguely that something was wrong. Then he had put the feeling out of his mind and gone to work. Now, suddenly, he turned to the illuminated 4-inch square panel above the door, read April 15th, 2563. The workman had checked a day early. He frowned. Either the superfather had ordered the machine changed, which was highly improbable, because every object in the city was standardized, and any change would upset the established order. Or the workmen were tied up with the man who had given him the different dream cards. In any event, he had to sleep in the tube that night, and he definitely wanted to dream the dreams on the cards he had just gotten from the man on the corner. He dropped the cards into the slot at the top of the panel, climbed into the tube, and pressed a button. The top closed over him like a hand. He lay still, feeling the warm clasp wash over his body. There was darkness and silence and a cool motion of antiseptic air. He could try the first dream. If it wasn't right, he could shut it off and sleep without dreams. He pressed another button. Silence. The sound of his regular breathing. Then a sighing came into his mind, and a green haze. The sighing became a soft breeze, the green, tree-covered hills rolling off to the horizon. He relaxed, aware in a fading, sinking part of his consciousness that the machine worked as usual. He would dream and wait and hope. And so the wind was breathing across the land from off a vast stretch of blue water, which broke along a sandy beach in foamy white breakers. The surf thundered all through his body. The wind brushed against him like a great purring cat. He looked up at the blue sky and seemed to feel himself rising and sinking, both at the same time, up into its depths. As his sight touched the sun, there was an explosion of brightness which blinded him. He turned away then to the rolling green sea of hills, saw the trees bending from the surge of wind, and heard the rustling of leaves. And then a deep voice moved through his mind. Outside the city, it said, all this exists. Despite the terrible burning of the earth back in the wars of its antiquity, the city was built as a place of life for those who yet lived. But those people were not aware that the earth would come alive again, and they made the city so that no death could enter it from without, and no life could escape from within. And they turned away from the earth and lived only with the city, so that it became their universe, to all but a very few of us. We still held a faint awareness of what the earth had been. This passed down to us for many generations, in whisperings, by the wise ones of our people, back in the beginning of the city. And in those times we had been in the city too long, for thousands of years. We knew that there must be freedom beyond the walls if we could get through. But the walls were thick and high and without a flaw, making a sky over us. We worked for 500 years on a machine to get us through the wall. Now a few of us have succeeded, and more will follow us to the freedom out here in the good land. There is room for everyone here. There are no boundaries, and no ceilings, and no walls anywhere. And you may join us sometime in the near future, if you wish. 23 sighed in his sleep. Now a great city faded into his mind. There were long, tree-lined streets and buildings, some built in rising spirals, some in spreading squares, others in ovals, domes, and curved half-circles. The wind wandered among the buildings and the bursts of green. People dressed in white flowing robes or black tights walked the streets. He could hear their footsteps on the stone or grassy walk. Could hear the hum of vehicles rolling along the streets or flying through the air. They were long and streamlined, or short and round, or they were curved like gondolas or squat like saucers, and they were moving at many speeds. Yet there was order, and the air was sweet and clean. A black line of clouds was rising across the horizon. Soon there would be lightning and thunder and cool rain. The deep voice touched him again. This is the city that can be, a city of life, open to the sky and the earth, a city in which people can find and follow their own lives. After the wars, the cities were built to shut out the death of Earth. But the Earth has come to life again, and so can the cities. The silence came while the picture changed, and 23 stirred, waiting. A figure grew in his mind, wavered, and became a woman. 23 saw the long body and the softness, saw the flowing hair and the smile as she watched him. He saw the gentleness in her face, saw strength under the softness, like the storm that lies below the charged quiet of a summer evening. Her lips moved. Paul, dream your dreams for us. The words seemed to fall on him. He trembled and cried out, and he felt a violent stirring in his body and a breaking away, as though he had flung himself through the walls of a tomb. The picture blew away while the voice continued. She is a woman, not a woman who half resembles a man. A pause. When you wish to leave the city, ask for the final card. You are welcome. There was silence and darkness. 23 stirred. He opened his eyes. The glow from the city outside filtered into the room through the translucent walls. He lay motionless. Paul. He was Paul, not 23. A man with a name. Wonder came into him, and a sense of strength and a willingness to remember without fear. His mind ran back to the first mistake almost a year past. He remembered the horror of failure then, and the terror at his being subjected to a mistake. He remembered the inference from the superfather that there might be a bad strain in his bloodline. He remembered taking the dream cards that were to have set him straight, and were to have shown him working over the machines with super speed, moving up along the production line to its pinnacle, and on up to the position of superfather, and on up to superfather plus, and on up to the place of father of the city. But the cards had been sabotaged, so that from them into his mind had come the dreams of the trees and the oceans and the green earth spreading off to the horizon and the expanse of blue sky. And then the words had directed him to the little man who had given him the cards on the street corner. They had known him, the words had said, through what was called telepathic screening, for ones suitable to leave the city. He was one of those chosen because he, like a few others, had been unable to adjust completely to the demands of the city. He was one of those in whom a rebellious nature had been passed down from generation to generation, by attitudes and acts of his ancestors, by a word spoken here and one there, by an intangible reaching out toward the sky and the green growing things, and the need to understand who and what he was. But in him now, this feeling was weak and close to death, and would die in him if he were not brought out into life of the earth. Now the memory receded. He lay motionless, listening to his breathing and his heartbeat, feeling his body press against the softness that held him. Suddenly, a shaft of light fell on him through the transparent square. Opening his eyes, he saw his wife's face staring down at him. She moved her hand, the lid of the tube raised. He lay watching her, feeling naked and, for a moment, helpless. "I talked for a long while with your superfather," she said. "I feel better. He told me you'd promised to take the prescribed dreams tonight." 23 turned his face away from her. She began to undress. "I'm going out for a walk." She watched him dress, her look a mixture of curiosity and fright. When he left, it was as though he were leaving an empty room, and she watched him as though he were not quite human. The glow of the city was all around him as he walked toward the corner where the little man stood. The telepathic advertisers reached out from the places of entertainment, pulling at him. The voices enveloped him for a moment, so that he almost turned back to them. But then he saw, in his mind, his arms working over the machines, saw them make a wrong motion that smashed a gear, saw the flashing red light and the heavy, expressionless face of the superfather. He was aware that his memory would be erased, and the skies and the ocean and the green hills, his name would be gone. Paul would die, and the city would be his tomb. Quickly he turned down a side street and saw the small figure leaning against the corner of the building. Walking rapidly toward him, as though he were being chased, he saw the lean, ruddy face smile, and the deep blue eyes look at him, heard the voice gently say, "Welcome, Paul." "The last card," said 23. The little man handed it to him quickly. "Good luck. Turn the dials one extra point on the control panel. Our men have made the machine ready. It's time now." 23 thrust the card into the inner pocket of his jacket. So that was it. They had changed the machine. "One extra point," he repeated, glancing up and down the street. "And remember," said the little man, "destroy all the cards you've used before. They were designed particularly for you. If you don't make it across to us, the superfathers will use the cards against you." 23 whirled around. The little man had gone. 23 suddenly felt weak. My God, the other cards left in the machine. If his wife... He stood very still for a long moment, then he ran. The door to his apartment swung open. The room beyond was empty. A light shone faintly. He stood for a moment, listening. Silence. He stepped to the bedroom. The top of his wife's sleeping tube was closed. He could see her face through the transparent square, could hear her quiet breathing. In one quick, silent motion, he stepped to the side of his own tube, pulling the last card from his pocket and dropped it into the glowing slot at the top of the black control panel. Then he turned the dials to the extra point. Several minutes later, he pressed the button at the bottom of the control panel. The top opened. At the same moment, he heard a step behind him. He whirled around. The Superfather stood in the doorway. At his back hovered the dark bulks of two other men. 23 felt his muscles lock. He saw the Superfather's dead smile, and then his wife stepping down to the floor and hurrying to the side of the Superfather. "Those pictures," she said, shuddering. "They were so strange." The Superfather held his eyes on 23, but spoke to the woman. "Thank God you were strong. It was commendable of you to call us." "I don't know what made me look at his dreams," she cried. "Maybe it was when I asked him if he'd taken the prescribed dreams and he didn't answer. Anyway, I tested his machine. It was insane." "Dreams made by some twisted mind," the Superfather said. "Remember, they've no real existence. Nothing lives or moves outside the city. There were old myths, but they've been dead for countless generations." He paused. "Where are the pictures?" "I burned them." "Good." He motioned to the men behind him. They came forward and stood on each side of 23. "23, said the Superfather. "We may have to erase your memories and your present individuality." He cleared his throat. "Our records show that some 2,000 people have disappeared in the last 5 years. Your case has much to do with it. Where'd you get the new cards?" The Superfather pulled out a pack of cards. "Before we leave this room, you'll be a different man, if you tell us." He waggled the cards in his right hand. "This'll be your new life. You'll have dreams of outdoing every man on the machine lines and fix your body so you'll have the capacity to do it. You will do it. You'll become a Superfather. You'll burn to excel them. You'll push on up, become a Superfather Plus. You'll work with ideas, ways of increasing efficiency, pushing the workmen faster and faster. And you'll find ways of conditioning them to meet the greater and greater demands for speed. The city and people will be at your fingertips. There will be rooms of marble and gold for you, soft carpets and buttons to push that'll give you any desire instantly. You'll have everything and be everything." He paused and took a deep breath. "All this will be yours, if you'll tell us where you got the cards, without forcing us to probe your mind with the electric scalpel." With an effort, 23 raised his eyes to the Superfather's face. "And if I don't tell you?" Moving a lever back and forth twice a minute, hour after hour, year after year, living in a bare cubicle, no entertainment, no desires. He paused. "And no memories." 23 looked over the Superfather's shoulder. The last card, he thought, is in the machine. Escape from the city. They said that. From outside. I've got to know. No matter what they put in the machine, that card will show first. Even if it's only for 10 seconds or 30 or 60 or however long. I'll know. "No," he said. "I won't tell you." The woman gasped and hid her face. The Superfather, scowling, made a motion. The two dark men took hold of 23. They lifted him into the tube. The Superfather dropped the second pack of cards into the panel and pressed a button. The top closed silently, like a mouth. For an instant, blackness and silence, like a moment after death, or a moment before birth. Then twilight or dusk over an ocean, a sky of pale blue, a shine on the gently surging waters, a scent of clean air, sea spray, the cool sound of wind. Then a man's voice, deep and flowing. You know that there is no entrance or exit to this city. It is sealed off and will always be so. But the dream machine in which you lie has been changed by our agents inside the city. The last card you dropped into it is different from the others. These changes have been made so your dream will become a reality. Your mind will be transcended to us here among the hills and under the trees and by the ocean. And a new body that we have grown artificially from all the elements, a body like the one you will leave behind, will be waiting for you. You need not be afraid. 23 felt himself moving forward. Sight and hearing and sensation without a body. Time dropping away like a forgetting of yesterday and tomorrow. There was only this moment. And then he felt the great humming, surging power of the machine, like an ocean rushing him towards some unseen shore. He was caught in a gigantic tingling shockwave, and felt like a tremendously outsized torch, lit and flaming, and carried, still burning, in the green tide of sizzling electricity. The machine screamed. The machine chanted. The machine raved. Dimly, he heard his wife cry, and above him felt the superfather scrabbling at the machine, the guards shouting. The machine shrieked, and the great tidal wave of power jolted and flung him, white-hot kindling, through air, through sky, up and down upon a white shore, upon creaming sands, leaving him to quiet, to silence, to a pulling away of the tide. Now the scent of sea came strong into him. He heard the crash and roar of surf, and the rustling of leaves and the sweep of wind. There were bird songs and the cries of animals. He saw the spread of rolling hills, saw a stream searching its way among great rocks and swelling and rolling full into a river, and the river flowing and sinking into the sea. He felt the earth upon his feet and the touch of grass. Breezes heavy with green from the land eddied all around him and filled his body and washed him. He heard his name, saw people coming toward him saying, "Welcome." He felt their arms embracing him. He saw an open city growing among the hills. Its buildings rolled away with the hills of the earth and became a part of the earth. The people took him by the hand and led him toward it, speaking to him of no one hurting the other, and no one locked in a cell, and all the walls of this world outside tumbled down. He was happy, and repeated the name they spoke to him. Paul. Back in the city, in the room, the wife cried out. The superfather, too, seeing the strange look on the face of the man inside the chrysalis of the dream maker, quietly touched the button that raised the lid. He bent down and took the wrist of the cold man lying there. Dead. Are you sure? The superfather bent still further down and listened to the chest, and the wife came close, and they both stood there, half bent. The mouth of the dead man was open, and the superfather listened for any faint whisper of breath. The wife listened. They both looked at each other for a long time. Because from the open mouth of the cold man lying there, faintly, far away, and fading slowly into silence, they heard quiet laughter, and the sound of many birds and voices, and trees rustling in the late afternoon. Then it was gone, and no matter how the two people bending there waited and listened, it was like putting their ear to a white stone. End of Perchance to Dream by Richard Stockham.
The Pure Observers by B.J. Rogers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Pure Observers by B.J. Rogers. "Oh, he is dead!" my mind cried out. Novna, my dear, I am writing this as a release for my conscience. Those things which trouble me are not such as one exchanges with vigil companions, or indeed with anyone not bound by ties like ours. If I were at home with you, I would exchange with your soul in a moment the feeling of my own, but distance permits no such consolation, and it is not suitable for me to exchange so familiarly with my colleagues. I find myself questioning the value of our customary refusal to communicate thoughts of a delicate and sensitive nature. The earth people, who speak their thoughts, perhaps are less primitive than we like to imagine. They seem to have no sense of the danger of overwhelming the soul of another with unwanted confidences. The purely vocal nature of their communication does not admit an excessive degree of emotion to their relationships. They do not have to erect any artificial barriers between each other, as we must who exchange on a mental level. These doubts of mine never could have arisen if we men of Hanos had not presumed to observe the alien ways of those creatures on the third earth, so like ourselves and yet so remote, though we have hovered above them, listening and watching, for 12 of their generations. This vigil, though it is to last but one journey around the sun, has seemed longer and less fruitful than all the others. I think I shall not come again, but leave such work to those who can remain efficient and disinterested observers, unmoved by doubt and anxiety. Novna, you must begin to think what we two shall do with the rest of our eternity, for now that I have spent some small portion of mine in 50 vigils, I find they have become distasteful. We might go to the Palace of Art and study to be poet-priests. My last vigil has convinced me that I am more fitted for that life than this. When our mission left Hanos for the third earth, there was aboard our ship the poet-priest Ven. You must remember the many nights we sat beneath the rocks by the ocean, listening as his soul gave ours his songs. Innocent they were, and filled with talk of purity and light, though Gven is as old as the rest of us, even if he is as different from you and me as the earth child is from its parents. You have never seen him, I think. He is smaller than I, slight of build and tender-faced. How out of place he looked among the ship's sturdy men of science, with their ages of discipline and austerity written indelibly into their features. They did not want him. They told the commissioner that they did not want him. "Let him stay at home," they said, "and sing his songs to those who wish to listen." But the commissioner himself, and, I suspect, the commissioner's wife, was as fond as any of Gven and his songs, so he said Gven was to come if he liked. Poor Gven tried hard enough to make us like him. He offered us the only gift he had, that of his songs. But no one cared to hear them except me, and I was ashamed to say so. In the end, he was reduced to sitting for hours, looking out into the night through which the ship bore us, saying nothing to anyone, for fear of our scorn. He would have liked us to tell him about the Earth people, for his studies at the palace fitted him sadly for a scientific expedition. Of the Earth people, however, we hesitated to speak freely, even among ourselves, for all of us feel strongly about them in one way or another. Our exchanges on the matter have always been burdened with emotion, and we find we cannot share easily our thoughts about Earth people unless we banter lightly and say little of what we really feel. When our longship drew near the third Earth, we were transferred into the round ship in which we were to carry on our observations. I could see Gven was limp with excitement, but, as always, I would not exchange with him for fear of the others, not even to drain off that excess of feeling which was to prove so dangerous to him. Perhaps he thought it would be different once we had established ourselves in our designated area of observation. Then we might warm toward him, giving him the comforts of our experience. If such were his expectations, he was disappointed. Whatever he gathered from us was purely accidental, information that we exchanged among ourselves as we worked. Only in this way did he learn of those few bonds we had forged with the Earth people. It is our custom, as you know, for each man to select one of the Earth people as his subject. This is not part of our work, it is only a device to drive away the tedium that descends upon men far from home and bound to exacting work in a confined place. We begin to feel quite passionately concerned with our subject, and occasionally find it difficult to return to our primary concerns. For some time I had been spending my free hours in the world of a gentle old merchant named Jacobs. I lived his life with him briefly, seeing his wife and children as he saw them, going with him to his store. His memories were good ones, filled with hard work and simple pleasures. One day, when I had left the computing tables to prepare for dinner, I sought the mind of Jacobs. He was crossing the street, and as he turned his head, he saw the shining lights of an automobile just before it struck him. I withdrew from his mind in a shower of pain and darkness. "Oh, he is dead!" my mind cried out to my vigil companions, before I could smother the shock and emotion in it. They looked up at me, questioning. Then I exchanged with them more coolly, "My man Jacobs has been killed crossing the street." Kevin, the fuel technician, reached my mind first. "A pity. I lost a subject myself that way not long ago. It is a bad death for them, poor things. They might build overpasses, mightn't they? A pity." It has never failed to unsettle me, the way my companions have come to accept the idea of death so easily. To me it is always a horror, unnatural and alien. You cannot quite see how it is, Novna, for you have never been in the mind of one who dies. I withdrew for a little while to mourn my man Jacobs, for my sorrow was not to be shared with the others. It was while I sat thinking of the dead Jacobs that Gven approached hesitantly and sat near me. "Is it possible," he asked, "that one can read the soul of an Earthman? Could I? Or perhaps that would not be permitted to me?" His eagerness made me ashamed of the silence I had maintained between us. "It is certainly possible for you to try, though it cannot always be done. You need to ask no one for permission." The delight in his eyes made me forget Jacobs a little. "I may try anyone at all?" "I advise you to search about a little. Don't seize on the first one you contact as a subject. You have less time than the rest of us for this sort of thing." Gven thanked me shyly and went away. Later I saw him sitting at the open panels, looking down at the cloud-topped mountains and sandy valleys over which we circled. His face was still and pale as he concentrated. The next day at dinner, Gven sat playing with his food, looking up at the rest of us frequently, as if his fear of our coldness were contending with his wish to open his mind to us. I was not the only one to notice his excitement, but the rest sat looking at their plates stonily. They liked Gven even less than they had at first, and preferred to ignore his presence altogether. At last I lifted my head defiantly, and my thoughts streamed across the table into the mind of Gven with such energy and violence that the others raised their eyes from their food in quick surprise. "It must be that you have found a subject. I should like to hear about it." At once Gven let his thoughts explode in undisciplined profusion. The men drew back a little, shocked by the unfamiliar impact of another's passion on their minds. The very first mind I sought was that of a girl who calls herself Maria Dolores. Often her mind turns in upon itself, and she reflects like this: "Maria Dolores, you have behaved badly to your papa today. Now you must go and ask him to forgive you, and give him a kiss." In this way she scolds herself for small misdemeanors. Her world is composed of happy, innocent trivialities, though as her purity touches on them and causes them to glow briefly before they are left behind, it seems that there are no more divine and lovely things in existence than those in the world of my Maria Dolores. Gven blushed and paused for a moment, then rushed on. "I sense that her father and mother have barricaded her from everyone else. They are strict with Maria Dolores, and sometimes she wishes she could go out to dances as the other girls do. But she is not sad for long, and goes to gather flowers for the dinner table. She sets them in long silver dishes that reflect the pink and red glow of the sunset slanting through the window. This pleases Maria Dolores, and she stands watching for a long time." Gven would have said more, but all at once Corvin, the cultural researcher, interrupted, looking at me. "Noven, what have you brought upon us by your curiosity? We are being buried in an avalanche of poetic fancies." After this Gven sat silent, his face burning, and the rest of us began to talk of the relation between the sites of mines and the locations of proving grounds. For many days I watched Gven covertly. He no longer seemed to care about our rebuffs, nor did he show any desire to ask us questions. He only sat by the panels, his expression withdrawn and intent, while the rest of us hustled busily and a little self-consciously around him. I came to notice a certain perplexity in his face after a time, and felt that I should ask if he needed any assistance. But I was awkward and unsure of myself, so I only watched him and said nothing. At last he came to me, having built up a powerful reserve of feeling that overflowed with the more violence of having been repressed so long. "There is something that is to happen in the life of my Maria Dolores," Gven began directly. Unaccountably, I tensed and tried to suppress the warmth I felt toward him. "Well, what is it, then?" I answered. He seemed not to notice the strain I was under. "They have told her she is to be married to a young man who they have chosen for her. She is unhappy, but cannot tell them. Now they are making many preparations. Maria Dolores spends her time with her mother, sewing dresses and packing them away. Then her mother speaks to her of things that frighten her and me, things that seem to happen when men and women are alone at night. She does not understand, and lies awake when her mother is gone, afraid and wondering. We are uneasy, Maria Dolores and I. Here, Novna, I must attempt to explain the marriage of earth people. While with us, marriage is the spiritualized union of masculine and feminine natures in one soul. It is to them a more concrete thing. Their junction is not only one of minds, but one of bodies as well. The union seems not to be unpleasant for those who take part in it, but for us, who so jealously guard our bodies from another's touch, the marriage of earth people is difficult to contemplate without revulsion. I was rescued from having to answer Gwen by the laughter of Corvin, who had overheard the last of the poet's words. "Well then, poet, if she is unhappy, you must take her away, mustn't you? That's what you want, it seems, to take her away to Hanos and make her your Gwina." Gwen stood up and glared angrily at Corvin. "Would it be so bad a thing to carry back one person of Earth? Why shouldn't we?" he flung at the other man. Corvin turned away in disgust. "You know we have no authority to intervene in their affairs. This is what comes of letting a poet-priest meddle in the concerns of science." A sullenness came over Gwen's face, and he withdrew from us again, turning back to the panels. I knew he was with Maria Dolores. Though I was uneasy over his ignorance, I could not help feeling relieved that I had not been forced to enlighten him. My anxiety proved to be well-founded. It was only a few weeks later that we reaped the results of our long-cultivated conspiracy of silence against the poet-priest. We were deeply engrossed in our work at the computing tables when our nerves were shattered by a cry of anguish from the mind of Gwen. In a moment we were standing around him, avoiding each other's eyes, and scarcely daring to look at the man shuddering before us, his face in his hands. "It is done." Gwen cast his anger at us like a stone. "It is as though she had been killed. Why couldn't you tell me? You, Novan, I ask you. Why couldn't you have spared me this?" The men looked uneasily at me and back at Gwen. Shaken, they drifted away, back to their work, still ashamed to meet each other's eyes. Gwen sat there, grinding his fist into his palm, staring straight ahead. He has been gone for some time now. At his request, a longship stopped for him on its homeward cruise. I have not tried to reach another subject, nor have any of the others. At least, if they have, they do not speak of it. We are reluctant to attempt any communion with these creatures, whose alien nature has been so strikingly demonstrated to us. The game of observation itself has become less a game, and we go about our work with a vague sense of unrest, as though the descent of catastrophe upon us were imminent. Gwen gave us one last gift before he left. He sang us a song that made us want to bend our heads to the ground in shame. If his songs are bitter now, and if there is no innocence in them, one needs not look far to find the reason. End of The Pure Observers by B.J. Rogers. Read by Roger Melin.
The Real Thing by Albert Teichner. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ella van Leeuwen. The Real Thing by Albert Teichner. Stacks of $100 bills, but sadly, almost all of them were genuine. Everything in this wing is genuine old fake, Stahl told the two tourists while his wife clung proudly to his arm. Like him, she was tall, blonde, and impossibly good-looking. Even this strongbox money is finest American counterfeit, she said. May I see it? Asked Smith. The lifeless face of the mathematician brightened as he peered through the quartz top at a dollar bill marked W8265286A. I can only get the worthless real stuff. Ancient governments always destroyed counterfeits. But you're in economic planning, so it must be easier to get good fakes. Only the merest imperfection, that slight mongoloid fold in Washington's left eyelid, Stahl replied, tightly encircling his wife's waist as if showing off all his finest possessions simultaneously. He glanced at Tinker, a cyberneticist who, like Smith, had sent several requests to see the famous suite of artifices. Ever try collecting? Not money, Tinker answered, eyes still on Mrs. Stahl. Got the Mongoloid bill 5 years ago, same year as I got Mary. He gave his wife an even more ostentatious squeeze. Smith stared at her too, but more with dull dissatisfaction than desire. 15 bills in the box now, but I've still only one wife. 15? Exclaimed Smith. The rich get richer and the poor stay poor. The wallpaper, Stahl smoothly proceeded, is a replica of Italian murals. If you adjust your focus properly, the flat columns become solids through the art of vanishing point perspective. Excellent period distortion of Greek styles, said Tinker, studying the columns. And those 3 chairs are fine copies of Chippendale. You're to be complimented on your taste in everything, Stahl. You really know ancient designs, Stahl said. Genuine old copies are even scarcer than their originals. And originals, of course, can never be quite as good. Sometimes I don't see why, Smith muttered. They all looked shocked. Smith, you need a checkup, Tinker advised. You sound run down. How can we progress without imitating past achievements? A little run down, Smith admitted, but let's forget it. Let's. Stahl nodded, striving to recapture the pair's attention as they went on through the suite. Notice the paintings. Those 2 are excellent pseudo-Brocks, and in the last room were fine fakes of Van Gogh, Picasso, and Chardin. In fact, he pointed towards a Gauguin-like nude, all flattened sensuousness, that one's as close to a real Gauguin as an imitation can go without being a mere reproduction. They all gasped, and even Smith shook his head reverently. To be that close to the real thing, it's all you'd ever need. Becoming more possible all the time, Tinker grinned suggestively at Mrs. Stahl. She looked back, mildly interested. We'll get there eventually. Happily oblivious to everything but his collections, Stahl led them into the library. One wall, covered with rows of book spines, swung around to reveal a well-stocked bar. There was also a large bar across the room, which quickly became a library of real books and recording systems. I'm not much for eating and drinking, Smith protested feebly. Who is? Mrs. Stahl laughed. But this must be a special occasion for you. Eyes bulging nervously, Smith ran his fingers through his luxuriant hair and sighed. Special it is. All right. Stahl casually mixed drinks for them all and sipped an old-fashioned. I've concentrated somewhat more on the 20th century of the old times than any other, he said. A particularly intriguing century, I find, although not crucial like the 21st, of course. The crucial one, Tinker protested. As a fellow antiquarian, I must beg to differ, sir. What about rocket travel, Mr. Stahl? When did that begin? Old hat, he yawned. And atomic energy. Same applies there. Look, Tinker, don't get me wrong, I love the period, but objectively viewed, the 21st makes the great difference. And what about duplication of life functions, like the mechanical heart? That really got started in the 20th. Absolutely right, Smith nodded vigorously. All strictly mechanical, Stahl sighed. But the 21st turned the study of pain and pleasure itself from an art into a true science. No, scoffed the cyberneticist. Stahl pounded the bar. All right, I'm going to prove it by putting on an all-sense philioscope of Thomas Dial. It's fully sense-adapted, so it should pick up perfectly. Hope it isn't noisy, said Smith. It's beautiful, answered Mary Stahl. I could listen to it all day. The odor of damp, new-mown grass filled the room, and another more elusive scent mingled with it. Entry of June 3rd, 2068, said an impersonal mechanical voice. From the journal of Thomas Dial, elected world's first poet laureate in 2089. A warm, rich bass took over. This morning, I rode far out to reach open countryside in the preserved areas to replenish my stock of sensory experiences. As I was walking along through the woods, the most delicious scent struck my nostrils. I immediately recognized new-mown grass in it, but the factor making the true difference escaped me until I realized the faint odor belonged to roses. At that point, my senses reeling with delight, I composed my mind most of my long poem, The Nature of Nature, grasping intuitively an experience more intense, more valuable than any real one. I say intuitively because I still thought the odor was merely that of grass and roses. A minute afterwards, though, I came into a clearing, spotted a forest ranger's cottage there, and discovered that the scent was from a recently improved insecticide that the ranger's wife was using in the living room. There was little grass in the area and not a single rose. The following note, interrupted the monotone voice, was added by the author in the year 2116. Here in real life, the great guiding principle of my future was brought home to me. The well-done imitation of a thing was better than the thing itself. This was the lesson I had to disseminate for all humanity. Interesting, Tinker said, although we all know now that one thing cannot be substituted for. Also, no discussion now, pleaded Smith. You need a while to consider all that. Anyway, I've been thinking about your bill, Stahl. That wasn't a fold on Washington's eyelid, just a tiny ink stain. It's genuine. It can't be. Stahl snapped and angrily led them back to the first room. Tinker, I want you as my witness. He handed the bill around, and Smith had to concede it was really counterfeit. What's that next one? He asked. A 10. Stahl hesitated, then took it off the pile along with 3 others and passed them to the visitors, showing off fine points of imitation. When he collected the bills, he carefully made certain there were still 5 and locked them up again. What about another drink? Smith asked hastily. No, Tinker sat down in a large chair. Let's straighten out something right now, Stahl. Dial was making the first crude statement of an obvious truth. If we have a pleasant sensation, it doesn't matter whether it's caused by a rose, or a chemical imitation of a rose, or by making a brain imagine a rose. Doesn't matter except that the real rose itself is the hardest thing to control, so it can't be as intensely real as its imitations. Mr. Tinker, isn't that crucial enough for you? Mrs. Stahl asked. Her voice was so rich and warmly rounded that Smith stared wonderingly at her as if trying to fathom an alien tongue. Not quite, Tinker shrugged. Stahl, you're discussing the smallest aspect of the 3-part equation. Stimulus plus stimulated body equals experience. Your poet was saying certain changes in stimulus would still give a stimulated body the same experience as the original. But the philosophers and cyberneticists, they always suspected something more radical. If the stimulated body was properly changed, the same stimulus could give different bodies the same experience. In other words, a properly arranged process would have the same experience as the life function for which it was substituted. Now then, he went on, all life reproduces itself, right? Well, they finally figured the most important thing to reproduce was a man's experience itself, not any particular form of stimulated body. Of course, we have higher ideals. We want the stimulated body to be as nearly like what it was as possible. Then we can have the best of all possible worlds. Some people, Smith grumbled, don't get their fair share of that best. Anyway, I hate all those theories, said Mrs. Stahl. Stahl disregarded them as he stared at his cash box. My money, he said ominously, has been changed. The two visitors exchanged nervous glances. That's not possible, said Tinker. It is. Somebody's palmed a real one as a substitute. That's very unfair, Smith protested. We came here as guests, strangers to you and to each other. We've given you the correct degree of envious admiration, and now you show your gratitude for our human reaction by saying we're deranged. Stahl was unmoved. I still say it's been stolen. He opened the box. See? The dollar's different. When the people of the old times made us their heirs and children, they left piles of this real stuff around with almost everything else they'd made. It's practically worthless. Tinker frowned uncertainly. If it makes you feel better, I'll submit to a lie detector. I hope you're capable of feeling shame when it proves my innocence. Good enough, said Stahl, turning expectantly to his other guest. As he waited, Smith pulled back a little. Well? Mary smiled, moving a little towards him. Smith leaped away from her, heading toward an open window, but the others moved faster and grabbed him before he reached the wall. What's the matter with you anyway? Tinker grunted, straining to hold him. The window's painted on the wall. Smith slumped forward in despair as Stahl triumphantly wormed the valued counterfeit from his pocket. I can't do anything right, Smith wailed. I heard about this collection and thought I could manage to get one little thing for myself. I haven't been given much else by life. You defective, Stahl shouted. Smith only slumped further forward. How can I help it? The Monte Carlo computer gave me one of the last places for advanced altering, and I have to wait and wait. Compared to you, I'm still a half-breed. Don't hand me that, Stahl snapped. I didn't mean physical defects. You look as normal as anyone else. No, darling, I think he's telling the truth, Mary said sympathetically. When altering began, it was only skin deep for all of us. I'll bet you're 60% altered already, Smith cried out. It's my bad luck to be only 25% so far. All I can do is look at her and wonder why the two of you make such a fuss. The cyberneticist tried to calm him. Your turn's coming. I have to find out what it's about sooner than that. Tinker sighed. I'll try to get your number advanced. Let him wait his turn, Stahl said coldly. He's faking a lot anyway. At that, Smith broke free from them and pressed his back to the optical illusion window. Don't come closer, he warned. I don't have much to lose. They stopped a few feet away and waited. Suddenly, he raised his left hand to his face and dug the long nails in a semicircle into his flesh. As a thin stream of locally circulated blood gushed out, he dug deeper and the eyeball fell forward, quivering on his cheek. He was telling the truth, Stahl gasped, pointing at the glittering metal bits within the eye socket. A glowing wire was slowly evaporating on the retinal plate as optical feedback collapsed. Tinker, all professional competence now, helped Smith to a chair. We'll be able to repair you in a month, he said, because you've a simpler arrangement, and I can promise you'll have as good an electrochemical neocortex as anybody. And the other more interesting changes too. Stahl glanced at his wife, then, as she nodded back, slowly put his precious counterfeit into the dangling hand. He was pleased to see enough consciousness was still functioning enough for the fingers to close greedily around it. Keep it, he said. You deserve it more than me. Suddenly he realized he was feeling not only shame, but pity too. It was the first time for pity, and that meant he was one step further on his own journey. how far that journey had already taken him. For, when their brilliant labors had dehumanized them, the humans had possessed sufficient understanding to pass the dead world on to the superior wisdom of their creations. If they had been unable to foresee what would eventually happen, Stahl and his fellow robots could. Someday the supreme knowledge and the supreme feeling would be perfectly wedded, the day they became truly humanoid copies of their makers. He moved forward, Tinker following him to help his fellow creature closer to that common final destiny. End of The Real Thing by Albert Teichner.